Welcome to Do.Different.Better with Elaine Rasmussen, where we're here to talk about wealth wisdom and money moves, making finance simple for everyday people. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen, founder and CEO of Social Impact Now, Connective Institute, and general partner of the Integrated Capital Fund. Thank you for joining me today. In our last episode, we talked about getting ready for investment capital in our business, whether you're looking for investment or you're thinking about making an investment as an angel investor. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the types of value and the power your money story has, moving your money with purpose and growing your wealth education and legacy. This episode is for anyone who wants to be more thoughtful about the role of money in their life. So once again, welcome everyone. Today I'm going to drop some knowledge like Beyonce is dropping hits about aligning your money with your values. So we're just going to get right on into it. So one of my favorite things in hell is how you going to win if you ain't right within. And that is so true when it comes to money. Unless you define what's important to you, whether it's family, sustainability, social equity, racial equity, gender equity, your values can be the backbone of your financial decisions. What I find is so many people are passive with their money. They're more choosy about their social media platforms or the phone that they have than actually what is happening with their money. But first, we need to start at the beginning. We need to first identify, what do we value? We talked a little bit about this on the first episode, and I talked a little bit about how my money journey, but one way to begin is, like I did in the first show, is asking yourself the question, what's your first memory of money? Then the follow-up question is, when did you realize money had influence or power? Those may be the same memory for you. They may not be the same memory for you, but it'll be interesting for you. And you may be surprised how those two small questions can unlock an awakening into how you consciously and unconsciously think about, manage, or in some cases, don't manage your money. I shared with you on the first episode the story of my mom and my grandmother and how they had very different perspectives and activating active actions around money. My grandmother didn't own a home in her later years when obviously after I was born. She was a live-in nurse, so she's like, I don't need a home for me to only live there for one day. That doesn't make sense. She was very much about wanted to always be dressed well. She did not mind spending $150 on a pair of pants. That may not sound like a lot today. It was a lot in 1978, right? So she was not, it was not above her to treat herself. It was not above her to, she often would say, I work, this is my money, I get to do with it what I want, and you can't take it with you. And that was her perspective. My mom, on the other hand, had this scarcity mindset around money, whereas my grandmother had very much an abundance mindset around money. And that showed up in everything. It showed up in every time we would go to the store shopping with my mom, she would always complain about the price. She would always complain about how that was too much for what the actual product was. And quite frankly, and we joke about this in between my mom and I, how unreasonable she was in those expectations. But it was very interesting for me as I started to sit with that and started to understand and think about how these two women in my life have such different stories and have such different relationship with money. One was just very free with her money, but always seemed to have it. Meanwhile, my mom had a very scarce mindset around money and always seemed to not have it, and even would borrow money from my grandmother. And so it was this really, really interesting thing that led to me navigating and trying to figure out what did that all mean for me, and what it was my reality with the job that I was working at the time, my salary. But I would say that I had a very unhealthy relationship with money for probably the first 25 to 30 years. I think it was really the birth of my son that really kind of snapped my head back and put me in a position to really think about me wanting to be an active participant in my own money journey. So these two questions, What's your first memory of money, and when did you learn that money actually had influence? These are two great questions to ask anyone that you're dating. If you're already in a relationship, it's a great question to talk about with your kids, talk with friends. And if you can listen without judgment, you can have some pretty insightful conversations that may influence your thinking and behaviors. You might want, my wish for you is that it creates some understanding and possible bridge of common ground with the people that are closest to you on how you can have better money conversations, but also think about um, what your relationship is, and how, where's the tension between you and some of these other people in your life. Share with me in the comments or DM me your aha moments if you actually are brave enough to have those conversations. I would love to hear from you. But now let's talk about the actual money. Your bank account isn't just numbers, it is part of your power. And like Susie Orman says, people first, then money, then things. So it's, why wouldn't you put your money where your heart is? And some of the one question that you can ask yourself is, where is your money sleeping at night? I think we talked about this in a previous episode. Is your money at a financial institution that invests in your community, that invests in people who look like you, or supports the things that you care about, right? Now, with the advancement of financial technology or fintech, you don't necessarily, who goes to the bank anymore? I think except for elderly people. No one goes to the bank. So that rationale of like, oh, well, it's in my community, it's next to me, how often do you really go to the bank? You might go to the bank because you've got a roll of quarters that you want to exchange for cash. You might have to I'm going to be taking a trip soon, so I'm going to be exchanging some foreign currency. But when we think about it, so I point that out, for that not to be a barrier around access, because many bank and financial institutions, they now have online deposit. You can deposit money from your phone if you're still getting a paper check and you're not doing automatic deposit. There's uh, there's auto deposit, electronic fund transfer. So the limitation of having to go to a bank that's in your community is no longer, even for those folks who may not have reliable transportation, right? But thinking about, where is my money sleeping? Because that money is being used to make loans. That money that you put in the bank is being used to make investments. So to understand how the financial institution where your money is, how they're using your money, I think could be some valuable information for you. Maybe you care, maybe you won't care once you get the results. But if you do care, it'll definitely be a worthwhile experience. So that's just one question. Another thing that's really important is for you to start setting goals and really thinking about, once you set those goals and have a clear understanding, money, right? What's happening? Are you trying to save? Are you anticipating getting a better job? If you're anticipating getting a better job with a better salary, what's the plan for that money? Oftentimes what we do is we keep moving upwardly mobile in our job and we don't have a plan to go along with it. So then we just spend more mindlessly. And then we wonder why, I've got this job, I'm getting paid 20% more money. Why do I not have 20% in my bank account? Well, that's because you didn't have a plan, knowing that you were going to get the promotion. Or once you got the promotion, or you moved into a new role, or you now stepped into your business and your business is doing well. You didn't have a plan of like, no, I'm going to keep my current state of living, right? I think there's a meme on Instagram that talks about, living below your means, right? And that way you'll always be able to be in a position to take care of yourself, right? But setting goals is really, really, really important. And it's not always easy. So how can you think about that? Well, one way to think about that is what's called a fire number. Have you figured out what your fire number is? A fire number is generally 25 times your annual expenses. It's an estimate of how much money you'll need to reach comfortable retirement. So whether you want to retire at 35, 45, 55, 65, having this equation allows you to kind of help you think about, how much does that need to be? And the 4% rule refers, there's a 4% rule, which refers to the idea that once this money is saved, you should aim to withdraw 4% of your savings every year during your retirement. So, well, that's one framing, and there's lots of framings you can use. That's one I like to think about because it makes it real of like, what am I doing now? And how long do I have before that retirement age? And is that realistic? And what do I need to do to get in gear to make sure that that's actually possible? And retirement doesn't mean that you go into a closet and like wait to die. Retirement can be, I'm living in a foreign country every quarter, I'm living someplace else, or I am I'm able to invest in real estate and fix up properties, or I want to do woodworking in my with my wood in my garage, and I want to be able to sell that, but I don't want to have to live off of it. Right? You'll be able to do that. So whether you sell one of your pieces, it won't matter because all of your expenses are covered. But if you do, great. It's going out to dinner money. That's awesome. These are just some examples of how you can start to create financial goals. Another is to get a financial advisor. A financial advisor isn't just for the wealthy. There are wealth advisors that work with you before you have capital or have funds with the idea that you will eventually be a client. So once again, hey, I'm on track for a promotion, or I know that my next role that I'm looking for is for a managerial director or VP role. So with that comes more salary. So they will work with you with the anticipation that you might become a client. There are wealth advisors. There are different types of wealth advisors, and I'll cover that in another episode. But for now, what's important for you to know is how they get paid. Often they get paid a percentage of the money that they are managing for you. That percentage will fluctuate depending on the amount being managed. The higher the amount that they are managing, typically the lower the rate is, right? And these are just examples. You'll definitely want to ask those questions if you start to talk to a wealth advisor of like, how do they get paid? I cannot tell you how many times I've had conversations with wealthy people and they don't even know how their wealth advisor gets paid. So once again, knowledge is power. But for now, what's important for you to know is how they get paid. The percentage will fluctuate depending on the amount that's being managed. There are other ways that advisors can be paid, like commissions or flat fees, depending on their brokerage firm that they represent. But once again, the most important thing for you to remember is that it is a relationship. You are talking about your money with this human. So make sure that you get along with them well and that you feel comfortable with this person, because, like a bad habit, it's not unheard of to fire an advisor. But first, you need to find one. I've sat on some foundation boards, and as we moved into making values aligned investments, our wealth advisor was not on board, and we've had to fire that wealth advisor. And these are millions and millions of dollars that these people are managing. And doesn't matter if it's $1,000, if it's $1 million. If you don't feel that somebody who's representing you financially is listening to you or valuing your thoughts and your considerations, then that is something to think about and something to look at. It's also important to keep in mind that setting goals is not just about making money, but it's also aligning your values and priorities with your financial decisions. And an advisor can help you with that. If you're centering your values, you may want to look for a values aligned investor, someone who will support you and your financial goals, but keep your values as a guidepost when making investment decisions. Let's say you're not interested in investing in private prisons, right? They can keep that into consideration, although sometimes you don't always have visibility into the investments that you make. Typically, we'll talk about this on another show. Your money gets invested in what's called a fund, which is a pool of investments. And sometimes they don't have control over whether or not the thing you don't want to invest in is in that pool. But it's becoming more commonplace and more regular to be able to find funds that exclude certain kinds of what are called sin industries. So that's tobacco, pornography, and gambling. Those are the big ones. Oil and fossil fuels are another one that is gaining traction as far as sin, what are called sin industries that people don't want to invest in. But what we will talk about is there might need to be concessions, like I just mentioned, and in reaching your financial goals due to the limitations of certain kinds of investments. Each kind of investment, which is called an asset class, has limitations within it by how it's structured that will align or not align or create some tension with you having a portfolio, an investment portfolio that is aligned with your values. So, a common misconception is that setting financial goals means sacrificing enjoyment and living frugally. However, it's possible to reach your goals while enjoying your life, but also by finding balance in saving and spending. And so there are ways to do that, right? I have a friend, myself and another friend of mine. We're very much about using our points, right? And I actually, my accountant was saying, he's like, Elaine, you have like over 100,000 points. You need to use them. And I said, don't worry about it. I'm going to use them to pay for a trip that my husband and I are taking, right? So once again, I'm staying within my budget, but now because I have a credit card that has points, I can now use those points to take a lovely vacation. I have another credit card that has lots of gift cards that are connected to restaurants. So when my husband and I go on these trips, we pretty much never pay for our meals going out because I have all these gift cards that I've collected from this other credit card that then pay for us to have dinner out when we are traveling. So these are things where you just can be a little bit more thoughtful about how you're leveraging your money in different kinds of ways to actually get to your FIRE goal or whatever your financial goals are. Let's see. So one way to start creating financial goals is examining your current spending habits and identifying areas where you can cut back or make changes. This includes reducing dining out, delivery services, other kinds of expenses, Amazon, you know who you are, or canceling unnecessary subscriptions. It's also helpful to prioritize your goals based on what is important for you. For some, this may include building an emergency fund, while for others, it might be putting together the down payment for a house or another kind of real estate investment. You're listening to Do Different Better with your host, Elaine Rasmussen. Coming up next, we'll be talking about money moves, taking back control of your finances, including budgeting, saving, and investing with purpose.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Do Different Better. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. We've been talking about understanding your values and the power of your money story. Now I'll get into money moves, taking back control of your finances, including budgeting, saving, and investing with purpose. So, moving on to talking about money moves like Cardi B, it's time to talk about budget with a purpose. Every dollar you spend is a vote for the world that you want to live in. So, what does that mean? What does that look like? And we talked a little bit about this before in a previous episode as well. We talked about when you make a choice to shop at a Kowalski's or a Whole Foods versus shopping at a Vons or some of the other supermarkets here in Minnesota, we have Cub Foods, right? You are saying that I support that organization, how they run their business and how they interact with my community. Now, maybe you've never thought about it before, but what I like to say is everybody is an investor. Every dollar you spend is an investment because there are other places and spaces that you can choose to spend your money. So while you may not know it, you are making decisions about what you're supporting with how you spend your money. So, what does that actually look like? And how are you actually going to think about a values based budget and prioritizing high impact goals, savings goals, right? So, one of the things that I like to tell people, especially if you're new on this journey or you've tried to be on this journey and it's been really, really hard. You just haven't been able to build in that discipline muscle. And it is a muscle, right? That you've got to exercise. And one of the things that I find is maybe don't even start with the budget, right? Don't start with the budget. Just start noticing, right? Some people say keeping a journal of every single dollar you spend so you can start to see how you're spending money, particularly on a day over day basis. I once had a partner and we were very serious. We were living together and we were contemplating marriage. And at one point I had to say to my partner who had a very different money story and money journey than I had to say, you are ATMing us to death. This is when ATM was more prevalent. There was no Venmo, there was no PayPal, right? The way you got quick cash was through the ATM. You had to go to an ATM and pull out $20, $30, $40. And I said, you're ATMing us to death. He was pulling out $20 like every 2 or 3 days. Now, mind you, we didn't have a whole lot of money. So at the end of the week, $60 being taken out for cash to eat out because he didn't want to come home for lunch. We lived 2 blocks from his work. And all of his work chums wanted to go out, and he didn't want to be the odd person out. And so the bank happened to be next door to his job, our bank. And so he was taking out $20 every 2 or 3 days. And I said, we didn't have a car at the time, and we were trying to save to buy a car. I said, we will never be able to buy a car if you keep taking out $20 from the ATM. And that, along with other things, it led to our eventual relationship demise. But going back to what we talked about in the earlier segment, having these conversations about people's relationship with money, it's a great conversation to have with somebody that you're thinking of getting serious with, or somebody you're already in a relationship. Even if you're already in a committed relationship, it could explain a lot about how they show up in the world and how they think about when you all are making decisions around money, whether individually or collectively. But one of the other things that I will share with you that you can do is pick a day and a time every month to review your bank statement or your credit card statement, or both. I have a day, I have a time. It's called finance tasks. And I have it on the calendar. And that's when I take my credit card statements and I go through my credit card statements and I look. One of the things that is really great is for you to look for all those like unrecognized charges. Unrecognized charges and false charges is a multi-million-dollar industry, right? I had a company, I didn't realize I was being charged $50 every month for about 3 months. That's $150. What would that look like over the course of a year? What would that look like over the course of 2 years if I wasn't looking at my bank statement or my credit card statement? So this is just one way you can start to get control and start to exercise the muscle. Just start looking at your statements every month and review and say, oh, what was that for? What was that for? What was that for? Did I actually charge that? And then the next step is, if it's a credit card, dispute the charge if you don't recognize it. Now, this is not to go willy-nilly, and you don't want to build a reputation of falsely making dispute claims. So take this tool very seriously, right? Because it could backfire if you're just randomly, you just don't remember because you went through a retail coma because you just went on a spending spree and you don't remember all the things you bought. Be mindful. And so maybe even have a place in your home, at your desk, in an envelope, in the kitchen, where you are putting every single receipt. So then you can check at the end of that month or the next month when your statement comes out, okay, which of these charges are actual, and are there subscriptions that I need to get, that need to come off, or something you haven't used. Maybe you had a subscription for a while, but the last 2 or 3 months you haven't used it. Well, this is now you're like, oh, you know what? I'm not using that service anymore. Let me take it off. Right. So it just gives you a little bit more control, and that's you starting to exercise the muscle. And once you get that under control, now it might be more comfortable to move on to a budget. But sometimes leaping from doing nothing to a budget can be a daunting and overwhelming task. So, once again, the other thing that I encourage you to do is pull out all those gift cards. I don't know about you, but I have literally a stack of gift cards from various people, places, and things, right? Especially if you're trying to live on a budget and get to your FIRE number. Instead of buying a gift for that next occasion, is there a gift card that you can either recycle or use that gift card to buy a gift, right? I think the younger generation, cash is king, but gift cards are a great alternative to cash. So you can pass that on to them. But if it's a gift card that they're not going to use and they're not going to want, don't give somebody else your trash, right? Buy them a gift from that store representing that gift card, and or ask them, hey, do you ever shop at this store? And then you'll know, right, whether or not that gift card might be valuable to them. So these are just some things that you want to think about. Some other things that you can think about as far as tips in trying to get a more handle on your money is get an accountability buddy. Is there somebody else in your life who's also trying to get a better handle on their finances? Doing this, there's a statistic that says people are far more successful losing weight when they do it in community, whether that's an accountability buddy, a trainer, a group, whatever. But the same holds true if you want to get to any kind of goal. Doing it in relationship with another person or a community definitely ensures a higher rate of success. So this is no different. Find somebody in your life who's like, you know what, I've been meaning to get a better control of my finances, or I want to live more values aligned with my finances. So great. Maybe you meet for coffee Saturday mornings at 9 o'clock, and you're like, okay, these are the three things that we're going to do together. We're going to review our financial statements. I'm going to share with you what I found. You're going to share with me what you found. You both are going to leave with an action step based on what you learned. Hey, what's the thing that we're going to do? And that could be, or you might even want to make a club about it. You might even want to incentivize each other. You might want to say, hey, if we collectively save $5,000, what are we going to do? We're going to go to an all-you-can-eat Sunday buffet brunch, right? At a really nice, expensive restaurant. I don't know, but definitely tie the behavior to rewards, right? That's another good way to cement good habits is tie it to a reward, whether that be, hey, we're going to hang out, we're going to take a trip with you and your partner if it's a long-standing goal that you actually accomplished, or maybe that was the goal. Once again, hey, I wanted to save up 20,000 points so that we could take a road trip and now not have to worry about spending any money because we have all of these restaurant gift cards that allow us to do that, right? So the other thing that people don't really think about is where and how can you leverage your money? So one of the things that we talked about small businesses and we talked about investment in the last episode, but let's say you do have a loan, and there are ways that you can actually invest that loan very safely in security by putting the loan amount. If you're not going to use the whole loan amount up front, maybe you need 50% today and you need 50% in 90 days. So you might want to take 50% of the loan capital, put it into a high yield, what means higher rate of return, in a savings account or a certificate of deposit, a CD. So let's say right now, some of these CDs are paying like 4.5%, which I think is like a record high. You could take $50,000 and make a little money off of that money, right? Once again, now you've got some extra cash that you've generated from doing nothing, right? So these are some of the things that you can really think about when you're trying to think through how you can sort of get more control over your finances and building a budget. When it comes to building a budget, definitely think about the big things, your rent, your mortgage, your car payment if you have one, and start to think about I love a spreadsheet. Spreadsheets are my love language. I get not everybody's with a spreadsheet. Sometimes people need to put it on pencil and paper. Doesn't matter how you do it. You can use Google Sheets, you can use Excel, you can use paper, but definitely get it in one place. And I would have on there, let's say you're using a spreadsheet. On that spreadsheet, you have a tab that's your budget. You have a tab for any goals that you have. And so you can track how you're moving toward or away from those goals. I would say if there's something big that you're saving for, that you have a tab for that you have a tab for list of activities that you want to start incorporating. So maybe over the first 3 to 6 months, you're just going to be reviewing your bank statements. The next 6 months, you're going to be reviewing your credit card statements and your bank statements. The next one is you're going to build a budget, but start tracking all of the things that you want to do to become more financially responsible on that spreadsheet. So you might start to see multiple things. And I would also add, if you're trying to pay off credit cards, have a tab for each one of those credit cards you're trying to pay off. It feels good to see when you make a dent or you make progress. So celebrate yourself, and by being able to have something that shows you that you're actually moving towards your goal. So if you've got a credit card and you're like, I owe $5,000 on this credit card, make that a tab on the worksheet, and every month show how you are reducing that $5,000 debt every single month. It'll make you feel really good, and it'll just be another flex on the muscle of actually creating your confidence in managing your finances. And once you move all through that, then you can start, and you start to understand your own personal cycle of money, right? How it flows in and how it flows out. And you can start to now look through and identify, where do I want to have even more control? is it now time for me to have a conversation with a wealth advisor? And you can bring this spreadsheet to the wealth advisor and be like, this is what I've been working on. Where can you be additive? Where can you help me? Right? So once again, the more information you have that you can bring to a conversation with a wealth advisor, with your partner, these are all going to be great things that you can do to help move yourself to have a more values aligned and be more financially confident in managing all of your finances. And frankly, your finances in partnership with your loved ones. So you're listening to Do Different Better with your host, Elaine Rasmussen. Coming up next, we're going to talk about living the legacy, sustaining your wealth and values over time.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Do Different Better. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. We've been talking about understanding your values and the power of your money story. Then we talked about budgeting and saving and investing with purpose. And now we're going to be talking about actually sustaining that wealth and thinking about legacy and what does that mean and what does that look like. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen, and welcome back. So, one of the things that I hope folks walk away with and don't feel too overwhelmed, but I can understand, especially if you are uncomfortable and you come from a familial background that does not celebrate talking about money. Um, Managing money is a full contact sport. We really need it, impacts us. It is a thing that is ever prevalent and the thing we talk the least about. And I believe that it being a full contact sport, we should act accordingly. We should be, I don't think we need to be thinking about every single minute of the day. That's not what I'm recommending or even suggesting. That can be very anxiety producing. But I think the more you control what's happening and the money in your life, I think your anxiety will actually go down. Part of the anxiety you're feeling is feeling out of control. Part of the anxiety that you're feeling is not knowing what any of it means or where it's going or how it's happening. But all of that is fixable. And we talked a lot about that in the last segment of what are the ways that you can start to take back control. And once you start taking back that control, it becomes its own natural cadence, its own natural language, and it becomes habit, right? But you've kind of got to start somewhere. It's kind of like going to the gym, right? Muscles don't just come from nowhere. You got to keep going, even if that's only for 20 minutes a day. You've got to start somewhere, right? So one of the things that you can think about when you get to a certain level, you've done all this work, you've been checking your finances, you've been looking at your credit card statements, you've created your FIRE number. So then what? Well, then you're in a position where you can even start to think and dream even bigger. What could it look like to leverage that capital into making an investment, whether it be in a small business, whether it be in an investment property, or maybe it's creating your own foundation. I have a girlfriend of mine. She's now at a financial position. She wants to have her own philanthropic organization, and we've had conversations about what could that look like that's more aligned with her values, because the current construct of philanthropy doesn't really align with her values. So we've had some really great conversations about thinking about how could she actually do philanthropy different than how philanthropy is currently done. There's one organization, the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation. They've actually brought in a new twist on philanthropy as opposed to a purely tax deductible organization. They've taken a very different approach in how they are doing philanthropy, and they set themselves up, instead of a foundation, they set themselves up as an LLC, a limited liability corporation. So there's lots of interesting models on there, but you can't really think about that until you clean up all the other stuff. But it's a really nice way to even take your values even further, right? Particularly when we think about taking your money and investing in a local business, right? Like, one of the things that I'm seeing very prevalent is younger people. It used to be that you invested in a brick building that had your name on it, or something, some material thing. But what I'm seeing now, the trend is that younger people, when I say younger people, I mean Gen Xers, millennials, and Zennials, are really wanting to know that when they make an investment, whether it be in a business or where they're spending their hard-earned cash, they want to know that there's some kind of impact that's tied to it locally. Our community is really, we had this globalization period that happened, and that happened during my lifetime. And now people are really starting to come back to what's local. I want to know my neighbors. I want to know the people in my community. I want to know that I want to be able to drive by that business that I made an investment in. And platforms like GoFundMe and I Fund Women are definitely making a dent in making that possible. But once again, all of these opportunities are quintessentially investments. So never do anything that you're not afraid to lose, right? And that includes anything that you do with your wealth advisor. Now, it's your wealth advisor's job not to lose money for you. But one of the things, it's kind of like my mom used to say, like never lend money that you actually need, right? If you're lending money, assume that you're not going to get it back. And I've had mixed results. I've had people pay me back money that I've loaned them, but I've also had people not pay me back. But I always kept that in mind of I'm not going to loan money that I'm not afraid to lose, right? And then that way it never puts me, doesn't mean I never do it, but I'm always conscientious of what could be the impact on me financially if I'm not aware, or if I have taken into account that I may not get the money back. And it's a gift. I'm in my mind, I may not tell the person it's a gift. They negotiated with me for a loan, but in my head, I'm thinking it's a gift. And now I can have a different relationship with that person, but also with the money that is now left my pocket. So these are just some things to think about as you start to gain more control of your money and start to get more comfortable and more confident about all of those conversations around money. Where can it lead? Where does it go to, right? And then obviously, as we talked about at the beginning of, so what does retirement look like, right? And making sure that you are aligned and you've created the financial means for you to be able to live that life. And that you can never start too young. I remember I was working at Nordstrom. I was in my 20s, and I'll never forget when I met this guy. It's always the story, right? I met this guy and he was traveling, and he came to the United States. He was a friend of a friend. It was like kind of love at first sight kind of thing. And he was traveling around. He was a performing artist and was traveling around, and eventually was going to Europe and then going on to Africa to perform. And while he was in Europe, we were writing. This is, once again, there was no email back in the day. We were writing to each other, and he was telling me how great it would be if I were with him in Spain. And I said, well, I can make that happen. And because I've been putting money into the company 401k, now mind you, I'm 21 years old. I've been putting money into my 401k, my work 401k. So I was able to draw out I took all that money. I quit my job. I took all that money, which at the time was $5,000. So we're talking what I think around 1982. Or actually, yeah, around 1982. And it was amazing. I took that money and I was able to go and travel, and I was young. So my thinking was, I'm okay with taking out all of this money out of my 401k because I'm young and I have time to rebuild this wealth that I've already accumulated. But what a great and amazing experience that I was able to take that $5,000 and travel to Spain, spend lovely time with this human who I adored, and then come back to United States. And quite frankly, I was able to find another job, a better job, paying me more money when I got back. So I just say that, not that everybody should take their 401k and like squander it on a love interest, but but that's the power of being able to, as you're young, to be able to know that if I start putting money into the company 401k now, and I encourage everyone to do it, and I encourage you to match, if you can financially afford it, to match whatever the company is matching. If they're matching your salary at 3%, add another 3%. So now you've got 6% that's sitting, that's making you money. You could possibly get to your FIRE number by the time if you're 20 and you start doing this, by the time you're 35 or 40, because now what you're able to do is no matter what job you go to, you can have your 401k follow you to your next job. So the 401k doesn't go away. It just keeps following you and growing as you move through different companies or different organizations. So these are all things for you to think about as you start to um, think about what's next and what am I doing now that can contribute to a greater life. Now, there's some of you who might say, listen, Elaine, no one is promised tomorrow. You're absolutely right. But if tomorrow gets here, you want to be able to like take care of yourself, right? So, and let's take the worst case scenario, right? You've been saving all this money. God forbid you or your partner experiences a very intense medical concern. Well, you now have the money to take care of it, right? One of the biggest, I think the statistic is the largest, the debt that gets people most financially broken is medical bills, right? So I think I talked about this story before, but for me personally, one of the things that I learned when I learned what wealth meant to me, wealth wasn't necessarily this number. It wasn't this like $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. To me, wealth was the ability to be able to cover my expenses without having to check my bank account. And once I hit that level, now it was just a matter of increasing that number. But that came to me as a result of I read a Susie Orman book. And in that book, Susie was talking, it's a great book. I think I still have it. It's got lots of highlighting and red underlining. I should pull it out and read it to you. Some of the things that I've highlighted from 30 years ago. But one of the things was she recommended just start saving $5. Just start putting $5 away. And I started doing that every week. And then after a couple of months, I bumped it up to $10. And I started doing that every week. And then I bumped it up to $20. And I was doing that every week. And then I bumped it up to $30. And I was doing that every week. Eventually, I built this little coffer of money, and it would just went off to the side. I never saw it. It was in a savings account. I never touched it. I didn't have access to it. I didn't want to have access to it. I didn't have a debit card, I should say, for it. And so I would have to go to the bank if I was going to take out that money. But what was so great was my son ended up having some kind of emergency. I don't remember what it was. It was a long time ago. But I remember the moment when I saw what the expense was going to be. And for the first time in a very long time, I knew I didn't have to check my bank account. I knew that the money that I needed to take care of that expense was in my bank account. It was in my savings account. And it was at that moment, it was a lightning rod. I'm like, oh, this is what wealth is for me. This being able to just be like, oh, I've got it covered. I don't have to worry about it. I didn't have to stress about it. I had to bite my fingernails at night, wondering and thinking about, because also remember, there wasn't a gig economy back then, right? Now you can maybe like go an Instacart for a few weeks or be an Uber driver. But even still with that, the living is questionable, right? How much of your life are you giving up by constantly hustling and piecemealing all of these things together? That in and of itself is super, super stressful, right? But it was at that moment, I was like, oh, this is what wealth is, right? The beginning. This is the sand in the oyster before it becomes a pearl of what wealth is. And then it's just going to grow and grow and grow. If I keep doing what I'm doing and get more disciplined about what I'm doing, it's only going to get bigger and it's only going to get better. And that excited me because I had never had that perspective in my entire life up into that time. And I was probably in my mid 30s when that happened. And so some might say that was early, some people might say that was late, but better late than never. And so I just want you to take this conversation, and once again, I hope this isn't anxiety producing, although it might be, but start to just think about what is the life you want and start where can we start, and start small, right? What is it? The voyage of 1,000 steps starts with the first step. So what's the first step that you can do? And I want you to make a commitment and send me in the DMs or on my social, what's the commitment you're going to make for the next 30 days? What's one thing that you're going to do in the next 30 days to get you more financially secure advance your financial or wealth education. Maybe it's going back into listening to the first 3 episodes of my show. Maybe it's sitting down and meeting your banker at your bank. Maybe it could be a lot of other things, right? So, but I want you to get conscious. I want you to be awake. But I also want you to spread the word, right? I want you to really start thinking about how you learn on this journey. Educate your friends, educate your family, your community on your financial literacy. Now, in conclusion, let's make our money work for us and our values. I know you can, just like Nas says. So let's do this together and build wealth that matters and that lasts. Well, that wraps up another episode of Do Different Better with Elaine Rasmussen, where we talked about money, your money story, the power of your story, and moving money with purpose and growing your wealth education and legacy. I can't wait for next week's conversation. Join me in the next episode of Do Different Better, where we're going to be talking about all things social finance. Let me know what you think of the show. We love comments, so tell us how this show helped you. If there's a money or finance question you have, or if there's someone you want me to interview, hit me up on LinkedIn or Instagram. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and follow me on the socials.